everybody. I see we got some viewers already. Good. Because we're going to dive in some more history today. Hi, everybody. Real McCoy. So let's talk about today about. Let me put my mic a little bit. Hi, Jan. Let me put my mic a little bit closer. Guys, Satan, and when I talk about Satan, because I already got some comments of people who have never seen my whole channel, right? But when I say Satan, I mean Satan as in context, right? Because Satan means adversary, right? I mean, everything that is against the will of God or against the kingdom is basically called adversary or to be adverse, right? Even Peter was called Satan by Jesus because Peter wanted to stop Jesus from fulfilling the will of the Father. Right? Come on, Jesus, let's go, let's flee. And Jesus knew that he had to die, right? So he said, get behind me, Satan. You're not going to take me away from what God has sent me to do, right? But also peoples and races can be our adversary, right? And even within our own race, they can be Satan. But basically, Satan as a collective is everything that is adverse against us, our God, God's will, and our kingdoms, right? And Satan is really trying hard and has been trying hard for a long time now to subvert our history, to change history, and basically now we're at the point where he basically wants to blot us out of history completely. So it is very important to hold fast to the facts, right? There is a lot of truth channels and new ideas coming out. I want to talk a little bit about that because every time you have a truth movement of any kind, there is immediately adversary coming in, right? Controlled opposition and such. So we have to also perform discernment of what's real and what's not real. And of course, it is good to have an open mind, but some things are just so ridiculous that it just pulls away the rock from under you completely, having no longer any foundation to stand on. And that is very dangerous, right? So many people say, well, let's hold on to Scripture, to the Bible, the Old Testament, and the New Testament, because the King James, they say, is the perfect preserved Word of God, right? So let's look at it, right? And like I always say, no matter what we find, don't throw away the baby with the bath water. But, the Bible in the Old Testament speaks about, for example, the lying pen of the scribes. So it's nothing new that scribes were lying or changing things, right? I mean, when you look at the Old Testament we have now, it's all translated from the Masoretic text. And the Masoretic text is not the original Hebrew, guys. The Masoretic text is a translation performed by Jews, right? And it is only like 1,000 years ago that they did that. Because that Hebrew that is now spoken and written is basically not the original Hebrew, right? It became the official Hebrew like a 400 after Christ. There are some documents in the Dead Sea Scrolls found with that Hebrew, but it was still in progress, right? But the oldest Hebrew writings we find are in Paleo-Hebrew, right? It was very similar to Phoenician, the ancient Phoenician, for example, but that disappeared. But yeah, we know that our ancestors, they started to make a translation in Greek. That was in the 3rd century BC, right? Everything became Greek. It was a Greek empire, but later became the Roman Empire, right? So Greek was the common language from Egypt to Europe, right? It was basically the modern day English. You can speak English wherever you go in the West, right? The Bridge Jackson says, I prefer Septuagint over the Masoretic, but neither are perfect. Indeed. I prefer many verses from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, because first of all, it is much older. It is written in biblical times, translated in biblical times, but it does not mean that the translators were perfect, right? So, but it is much closer to the source than the Masoretic text that came 1,000 years after Christ, right? So every time people say, well, the Old Testament says this or that, there is nothing wrong with also questioning, because if you really study scripture, right? And I'm not talking about what these pastors tell you about study, right? You read the Psalms and you read 1 or 2 verses from Isaiah, and now you study the Old Testament. No, it is making a harmonious story, right? Where the New Testament fits the Old Testament. The New Testament is a fulfillment of the Old Testament. So if there is anything wrong, there could be a problem in the New Testament writing or in the Old Testament, right? And this is if you have the time and the zeal to do this, it's a very interesting study, right? Let me quickly say hi to you guys. The real McCoy says, why do you have an American flag on your wall? Oh, well, it's because I live in America and I see that just like the flag, it's weathered, right? So it's not purely symbolic, right? But I just live in America and I like the American flag, therefore, right? And if you see, the 13 tribes are on there, the 13 stripes representing the 13 tribes, right? That is if you count not Joseph as one tribe, but Joseph as 2 tribes that went through his sons Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Wash Your World says the Masoretes included vowels, massive opportunity to introduce mistranslations. Yes, exactly. Wash Your World. Yeah. Karen says, I read the translation of Christopher Sparks' Keys of the Kingdom Holy Bible. Yes, Christopher Sparks did an amazing job. He spent 25 years translating, right? But I think his main goal was to translate what we have in proper English. Christopher is very good at language, right? He used to edit for different companies, I think, and so he's very good at grammar. He understands grammar very well, right? But I'm not. I think Christopher translated the Septuagint, the Masoretic text into English, right? So he did a great job, but there is no Bible, whether it is the Christogenea Bible or the Christopher Sparks Bible or the King James, or there is no perfect Bible. But there are men like Christopher who has a great zeal to get closer and closer and closer to that perfection, right? But we know that there are things added, taken away, right? Words have changed, meaning of words changed, so everything has to fit, right? I can make a video with examples how they changed names and stuff, and even timelines. So many has changed in the Old Testaments, guys. Real McCoy says, I'm sorry, I thought you lived in Britain or something. That's cool, thank you. Yes, Real McCoy, I used to live in Britain. I lived in Northampton for a few years. And then I ended up in Texas. Yeah. So I indeed did live in Britain, right? And I have a love for Britain, for my people, right? I mean, I left Netherlands to do this, right? Pure fate, pure fate. And I didn't know where I was going to end up, right? God made some promises, right? He even told me I was going to end up in Texas even before I went to England. Never knew how that was going to happen, but it did happen. But I'm in America. I'm not an American, born American. I'm a Dutchman. But my ministry is about uniting my kinsmen, right? There's a lot of, and I think the adversary was behind that as well, trying to scatter again the sheep of Israel, uh, turning the white people against each other, right? Especially after the French Revolution. Look how many people died, white people died fighting each other, right? In the French Revolution. Look how in America, right, over things like slavery, look how many white people died, right? And now you see also in the Second World War, look how many white soldiers that just fought for their country or what they told them they should fight for. Look at the, and you know, my point is we are brethren. We all came from the same root, right? So I'm looking from the outside in. I'm not part of a church. I'm not part of any community, right? Even I live even far away from any white communities, and it is. I think God has done that, so I can stay based, not be drawn into cults or denominations, or you know, I am looking basically from the outside in, right? And I look as our people as a whole, and I think that's the reason that God set me apart from these groups, and hopefully there will be development in these wide communities now, right? I would love to visit them, but I cannot judge how it's going. I wish them well, and I would love to visit. But before this came around, I noticed that white people are not really ready to have white only communities. Maybe I'm not talking about the current one, but over the years, what I've seen is that white people are so put up against each other, whether it is in politics, right? Whether it is with ideologies, moral standards. Look what's happening. White people, Democrats versus the Republicans, right? Americans versus the Brits, right? Americans have thought they are the greatest and the best, so they have to look down on England, that small island, right? I also noticed that whenever I speak with white Americans, and I just say things as a neutral observation, they get offended really quickly, right? If I, for example, tell a Texan who looks down on that small island of England, right? And when I, for example, say, well, England may be half the size of Texas, but it has twice the population, right? Texas, there's over 30 million people living there, but England has headed to the 70 million now, right? And if you say that, they get angry, right? How dare we are the greatest? How come that? Yeah, it is a fact, right? But it doesn't matter, right? I want us to stop fighting each other and seek truth. They have been lying to us about so many things, right? I started with Bible. I'm going to continue with that, right? I went to a school, trucking school, and there was 95% or 98% black. And I was basically the only white man there. But one of the instructors was white. But I have an obvious accent. So he asked me, hey, where are you from? I said, "Oh, I'm Dutch." Oh, okay. So I asked him, "Hey, do you have any idea where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from America." I said, "Yeah, but I mean your ancestry. Do you know any? Do you know? Are you English, Irish, German?" He looked very German. He said, who cares about that shit?" He said, "I don't care about all that." So a lot of Americans just don't care anymore. They can't see what's happening, and they have no love for their history, and they just have been absorbed in this new idea of America, right? Where everybody is just a product to make the billionaires richer, right? Again, I'm not a communist. I don't mind if some people make more money than others. But we see now it's not a matter of some people make more money than others. Some people even are rich. I'm talking about some people have $600 billion, and other people don't even know how to get to the end of the week through their paycheck, right? So there's a lot of problems there. Also, I know I worked at a company. They manufactured signs. And also there, I was from the 20 people, there was only two other whites. One was mixed, he was half Indian, but he looked white, blue eyes. And the other one was white, Polish. But what I noticed is that one, the half Indian, he became my friend, my work buddy. We even met up after work a few times, right? But he was a new Christian, so everything I threw on him, about the Bible, it was a little bit too much for him, I guess. But we were buddies. But I noticed that the other white guy, the Polish from heritage, he came in from Chicago, so his family settled there, but he was now also in Texas. When you look at the rest of the company, um, they were black. One was such a mix. He looked a little bit black, but he said, "Yeah, I got family from India. Um, my father is black, my mother is white, but she's mixed with American Indian." He was a whole mix of things, and there were people working from Colombia and Cuba. And even though these black people from Colombia, they were immigrants, what I noticed is they were accepted and seen as fellow Americans for some reason. And me, as a white man from Europe, was seen as an outsider. And that is what I see a lot, that you're a white European and you're always an outsider. It doesn't matter if you're in a group with black people, white people, Korean people. The dude from Europe is always the outsider, right? But that's fine. I don't mind being an outsider, right? I'm just observing, right? So, but this is where we are now, guys. You would Girl says God is opening eyes to our Israelite identity more and more. Yes, praise God, you would girl. You know, when I talked about these things a few years ago, no one, there was only a few who wanted to hear it, but I noticed indeed that over the last 1, 2 years, especially, that suddenly people are ready to say, you know what, something is off. We need to go back to the truth, right? But like I said, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that is just not true, guys. That is only to spread more confusion. Emma has a job trial. Oh, great. So you went through the interview already, Emma. Praise God. Yes, praying for success, Emma. The Bridge Jackson. Patty, you may be right. They are both from a corrupt tree. Yeah. So, guys, the Old Testament, the timelines, if you compare the timelines, the genealogies, and these things from the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, it's different, right? A lot of things have been changed, also making it seem that there were non-Israelites part of Israel because they changed names, right? King James is talking about Ethiopia, but in the time they speak in the Old Testament, it was called Cush, not Ethiopia, and it also has distorted our history. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ethiopia too, right? But not just the Old Testament has problems, guys, and only through really study and be consistent, right? You can find the errors, right? If you have 10 verses saying one thing and then one verse says another, you can find out why is this one verse so inconsistent with all the other verses. Well, you can do a word study. You can indeed go to the Masoretic text because not everything is bad, right? But then you see, wow, in the Hebrew it doesn't even say that, right? Also, the New Testament, guys, there are a lot of problems with that, right? And we just don't know what happened. And the oldest manuscripts we have are forgeries. Now, a forgery does not mean that it is totally made up. A forgery means a copy, right? A copy of the original. Uh, for example, you have people who make a copy of a painting. It looks exactly the same, but still the copy is a forgery, not the original, right? If I make a painting of Van Gogh, it looks pretty identical, still a forgery, right? So the oldest manuscripts we have are a forgery. And yeah, how can we really say, well, every single word is given by God, right? Why is it so impossible for us to understand that when even the prophets in the Old Testament was talking about the lying pen, the scribes, right? And you had in the first centuries, the first 4 centuries, a lot of Greek influences, Greek mythology coming into the church. Um, the Romans adopted a lot of Greek gods and ideas. So why is it so hard to understand that over 400 years, right, they changed stories a little bit, they added a little bit here and there. Even scholars agree unanimously that the last, what is it, 11, I think, 11 verses from Mark are added later, right? Benjamin says, don't want to derail the conversation too much, but as a new viewer, I don't know your position on the nature of the realm, planet, plane that we live on. I'm curious. Oh, well, or maybe when I just became a Christian, when that whole flat Earth came out, it was that was, I think, in 2014, when that guy from NASA came out, admitted that all these things he made for NASA were basically paintings, right? And I looked at all these videos, and you know, I hate to say 100% I know this and that, but I do know that the evidence for the flat Earth is much more overwhelming than the round Earth, right? Even in planes, I'm always observing, and yes, the horizon never curves. It looks round because, when you're standing on the middle of a circle, it does this, not this, but this. So yeah, I looked at all these things. So in my opinion, we're living on a flat plane, which is basically made by God. I think, I don't want to divert too much, but they found that your molecules, the smallest part are atoms, right? An atom is not even the smallest part. An atom has neutron and a proton, electron, right? So they did tests, and these smallest parts they're not even solid, right? Atoms are not solid matter, so we are made up of something that is not solid, right? It is energy, it is light, and it vibrates at a frequency. They found out, right? But I don't think we should live thinking we are a frequency, even though it can be helpful, understanding that thoughts can influence that frequency, but that God made this made us connect to our bodies in a way that we experience this physical plane, right? I don't think there is much out there, right? So that's what I think. Maybe I can uh, talk about this in another video, but I want to go over history, right? Also, a lot of things they don't tell you. This whole um, idea from Jew and Gentile, yeah, you have the Jews and the non-Jews. It's just not true. Gentile does not mean non-Jew. It does not mean that, guys, right? So we as Christians now, especially, we see the modern day Jews as the chosen people, and we are just grafted in Gentiles. And yeah, our history. When did it start? Right? The church. When did it start? Well, in the first century, this is where the church started. You have always these black people saying that the first oldest church was in Ethiopia. That's just not true. That church, old church, is from the 4th century because Ethiopia was still part of the Roman Empire, right? And you see a lot of swastikas, for example, which used to be the symbol of the white race, right? I'm making a series about that. I made part 1 talking about the modern day Syrians. I'm going to talk Ethiopians, North Africans, and Egyptians as well, right? That they are all ruled by white people. I'm going to show that in videos, right? But they discard certain things as myths. But why is it so strange? There are so many old stories that Mary went to England, right? I mean, you read the Bible story and then, yeah, they died. And no, 70 AD, right? The mother of Jesus, the family of Jesus, they didn't just stay there and everything was destroyed. They died. Who says they didn't move away, right? Why wouldn't they go to England, right? Joseph of Arimatheas, it was the uncle of Jesus. He had tin trades, right? He went to England. There were the tin mines, right? But it's like we cannot accept these stories because, yeah, but we are not Jews. They were Jews. They were not here, right? So there is another book called the Linda book, which verifies so much history, guys. The thing with us Christians is that we, like I did in the beginning, I like to watch these Bible stories, right, from Hollywood, and then see how it was, and you imagine Jesus walking around with a white robe and sandals, and then basically there was 2,000 years nothing, and now we are modern day Gentiles, and you picture everything in that time, but no one really wonders about the actual history and the timeline. That is all the way in the past and now, and in between it is not important uh, at all. And also, you have to realize that the Bible is basically describing what happened to Israel, right? Yes, it's talking about Adam, the sons of Noah, right? One son, Japhet, for example, he moved away, right? He went east all the way to China, into Europe, but the Bible doesn't really talk about it. Paul mentions, for example, the Scythians, but there is nothing about Scythians in history, right? The main focus is the story of Israel. But it doesn't mean the other white people were not in the world, right? We were everywhere. So many people are afraid to look at extra biblical history, but it is so important for us as a race, guys. And this is where the Linda book is very interesting, and they call it also a forgery. And yes, there are some bad translations translated by people with a universal mindset, make it look less racist. But Linda book speaks about things that we much later only found in archaeology, right? And it's talking about the Frisians. Today, modern day Holland in the north, you still got a small part, a state or a province called Friesland. It's still called after these people, but Frisian was a huge people, right? And they were already talking about the Franks, right? And the Gauls, they were talking about Gauls, right? Gauls were also a people, a white people, right? And the Gauls, they became the Franks, right? Who created France, right? But even the Gauls had kingdoms in modern day Turkey. That was still Asia Minor back then, right? And Paul wrote letters to them called the Galatians, right? Telling them that they are of Israel, right? Part of the lost sheep of Israel. It's all connected to each other. And these Frisians, they describe themselves as blonde, white people, right? And they wrote down their history. They went to the whole Mediterranean, guys, right? They had contact with Egypt. They even describe Greece, how they had settlements in Greece. Guys, our history is so rich, but of course they don't say, it's just a fake, it's a hoax, the book. No, it's not a hoax, guys. That is a rich history, right? And I also think that we are much closer to the time of Christ, right? Because when you think about it, 2,000 years ago, Christ was going to set up his kingdom, and we're still waiting, right? It's going to be another 1,000 years, right? And that therefore I'd speak about the millennium reign of Christ, right? And short season where Satan was loosed. And I don't picture it as a perfect time. I don't picture that at all. But I do believe this is where Christ reigned, right, over the believers. And I think the believers were the spiritual Zion, and the law will come out of Zion, the Bible says. And I think they were the guides. Like we will be like the angels, right? They were the guides. I think they were the leaders, spiritual leaders, right? And over time, Europe became Christian, right? But it was not perfect, and we had many enemies attacking, right? The Turks in the east, the Muslims in the south, right? We weren't without any problem, but this kingdom started, right, in us, right? It will be like a mustard seed that will grow and grow and grow and grow, right? But a while ago, I shared a video with a professor who proved that he added like 700 years to the timeline. And isn't it interesting? When you see these old castles and these old churches in Europe, in France and in England, why do these buildings look like they were built in the first century, right? What if they were not, yes, they were built 1,000 years ago, but not 2,000 years after Christ? Why? When was it much earlier, right? Why do we think that in the first century you had all these giant cities, right? Like Corinthian, right? Huge cities. And then suddenly there was a big destruction, right? Rome was destroyed. That lasted 400 years, according to prophecy, and then it was destroyed. But then we have 600 years, literally nothing, right? Just walking through the mud. I can imagine if there was a big destruction, right? The end of that world, the Roman Empire fell. I can imagine there was a short period where people had to start over again. But I don't think that lasted 600 years, guys, right? So I think all these castles we find are maybe not 1,000 years after Christ. That happened in the first centuries, maybe even earlier, right? So we have to start thinking about these things, right? Now we have all this talk about that the white man only appeared 400 years ago, guys. If we don't understand our history and everything I talk about, we might as well just give up, right? Let me show you something. Because they are literally pushing for this. Forget about your history, forget about your Bible. It's all a hoax. You are nothing. And now this is happening. Let me show you. This is not satire. This is serious, guys. All right, here.
Bala Kubala.
Please, where?
Fiona.
He's here. Blessed be the King of the North. Blessed be the Holy One of David.
A group claiming to be an African tribe with its own king and queen have set up in a wood in the borders with a vow to expand over Scotland. The Kingdom of Kabbalah claims they have settled here to reclaim land stolen from their ancestors in the Highland 400 years ago. But vigilantes are targeting the group of three who are based in Jedburgh and been hit with an eviction notice by the council. 43-year-old Jean Gasho, who declares herself tribal queen Nandi, documented life with her husband, 36-year-old King Atihene, whose real name is Kofi Ofe, and their handmaid Asna.
So this is actually happening now, guys. We have now Black Hebrew Israelites. We have now people from the tribe of Bokuba Kabula claiming that they are the original Scottish, right? And we let it happen because we are ashamed. They have shamed us about our history. We are evil, guys. We are not evil. We were not perfect, but we always had this special thing, right? We were men. What does man in Greek mean? Manos, hand. We basically were created in the image of God. We became the hand of God. We created things through God, right? And we always had this desire to expand our horizons, to move all through the world, right? We were the only ones who ever did that, right? And now you have people from, I don't know, Zimbabwe or the Congo going to Scotland, sitting there barefooted, claiming to be the original Scottish guys. It is just ridiculous, right? And white people say, "Oh, this is awesome! Oh, this is so good for these people. Good for them, right?" But guys, our future is at stake, right? But we have given up, and a lot of us are so spoiled with modern day technology. Like I said in my other video, I grew up in the Netherlands in an old town. I lived in a 17th or 18th or 17th century house, and I felt so comfortable in that house, and I felt a spiritual connection to my forefathers. It was so natural, right? All these old cobbled stone roads, the ancient churches, right? That was part of my heritage, right? And but I don't want to offend Americans, right? But where I live here in Texas, the city where I live in, it's just concrete. There are no roots, just slabs of concrete with a few houses on top. And these people sadly never experienced to be in a city that has spiritual, historical roots. And it is so important. You feel so much more grounded, guys. I've been to Dubai, for example, and it's beautiful, brand new, it's clean, organized, but you also feel that it has no roots. You know it's a sandbank that is only started to build it not long ago, right? So no, the black people are not the original Vikings or the Scottish, right? It is identity theft, guys, and we let it just happen, right? It is probably true that in the 1800s something else happened. If you believe in the short season where Satan was loose, something did happen. Because how come that suddenly we went to Europe, we went to America, settled on the East Coast, and then gradually went west into the wilderness? in the 1800s with horses and carriages, and then at the same time we built these giant buildings everywhere. That doesn't match up. But this idea that the black people ruled America and Europe until the 1600s, and then the white man came. That's what they say. The white man came 400 years ago and destroyed all the blacks and just stole everything. Guys, it is just pure nonsense, right? But it might be true that we are, I mean, I talked about this before, we are those people who didn't make it the first resurrection, right? It says that the Bible's talking about the first resurrection, right? They will rule with Christ for 1,000 years. Maybe we are that second resurrection who didn't make it into the first resurrection, and we have to now deal with stuff we didn't want to deal with before, right? Maybe we are now here to learn about Christ, to come back to God, right? And also learn about the maybe we are dealing with the consequences we didn't want to face back then, because this is not the first destruction, guys, right? The old world, the old covenant period was destroyed, temple was destroyed, and then for a few hundred years later, the Roman Empire was destroyed, right? And yeah, for all I know, maybe we're headed toward the next reset, the next destruction, right? But if you realize, you know, that there is this documentary on the internet, what's it called? Skeletons in a Cupboard. It's about ancient tribes living in New Zealand. And they have blonde hair and blue eyes. They didn't come from Europe. They have been living there for thousands of years. And according to their stories, they came from India. Now, if you watch my other videos, you know that India, there were still white people living there, creating, giving them the religion of Buddhism, right? That's why Buddha is depicted with blue eyes. It's not that long ago that we were there, guys, in India, right? So the ancient stories is they came from India because there was a war between the white people and the dark races in India. So they fled, right? So they did a DNA test, and it turns out they were true, right? We find white people, blonde hair everywhere, right? Even in South America, there is talk about white people with blonde hair, right? Even Easter Island. These were all people who a few thousand years ago left us, right? They moved all over the world, right? Visionary vet says, I'm a third Cherokee and have blonde hair and blue eyes. Yes, most white people I meet in Texas, they all say, I have Indian in me, right? There's a lot of white people mixing with Indians here in the South. I noticed, yeah, and many look very white. And I think if a white mixed man marries a white woman over generations, they become white again, right? You hardly don't see it no more, but that's especially here in Texas. I see that happening, right? But our white history, guys, it goes back thousands of years. We all come from Adam, right? We find white people in China. They call themselves the descendants of the Romans, they say. There is a tribe in China with blonde hair and blue eyes. We find mummies from the 8th century BC, I think. Blonde braids, red hair, blonde hair. We find it in India. We find it in South America, in New Zealand. Everywhere we find them. Guys, our history is so rich, right? Now, these black Hebrew Israelites are just deluded, and I think it was the Jews who set them up against us, right? The original Hebrews are not Israelites, right? It is just, and I make many videos going on all these topics in more depth, guys, right? I just want to give a little bit a love for the white race, right? There are a lot of people who are mixed. They have a little bit of brown or black in them, and just like Nick Fuentes, right? Nick Fuentes, he's not a white man, guys. He is Mexican, even though he has some Irish DNA, I think, but he is not a white man, therefore, right? But somehow he explodes on the internet, and he is now the spokesperson for the white race, right? And like I said the other day, where are my people? Where are the real European people gone who speak for truth, right? Why is it the Hodge twins who are now the ambassadors of truth? Why is it now Candace Owens who is the ambassador for truth? Where are our people gone, guys? And I think it's all by design to make it less and less important to even be European and make it more and more acceptable to become a mix, right? And so many people are mixed nowadays. And often you see that they stop caring about the race. Not all, but often you see that, right? They stop caring. But, why would you care if you're already mixed, right? Love McKin says, I was also told was part Indian, even though my family had blonde hair, blue eyes. But going through my genealogy, there isn't one single Indian marriage. We're all Anglo and Norman French. Well, I heard that, I think it was 60 years ago or something, where it became fashionable to have Indian DNA. So I think, I don't know if it's true or not, but it turns out that many white people made up that they were mixed with Indian because it was fashionable, right? Or it had some kind of benefit when you said that. And there's a lot of white people who think they are, and then it turns out they are not. That is also true. That also happens. Patty says, sometimes I think that our generation is the Israelites who died in the desert exodus as unbelievers. The last will be first, and the first will be last, said Jesus. Well, a lot are dying, right? And a lot will be judged, but there is a remnant, right? And don't think, well, I'm white, so I'm good. No, the Bible is very specific, right? That you have to accept Christ, right? Because the unbelievers, they are not Israel. You are only considered of Israel if you have Christ, right? This is why you are Israel, right? And we have to guide and lead our brethren, our kinsmen into the truth. But we are fighting a massive media giant that is constantly pulling them back, right? In false stories, false narratives, right? I keep seeing things about Nazis and Germany and Hitler and every day still. And the more people started to wake up, the more Facebook and YouTube puts out these videos trying to pull you back in that narrative they created 80 years ago, right? And I'm getting sick of it, right? Yeah, but these evil German soldiers, the German soldiers were not evil, right? These soldiers were not doing stuff in camps, right? What happened in these camps is a different story. I'm talking about soldiers. They were protecting and fighting for the country, right? But they are seen as evil. What, are American soldiers evil? Because they also just fight for their country, whether they're lied to or not. Are they evil now? Because everywhere I go, veterans are being put on a pedestal. Every time you apply for a job, are you a veteran? Because they make it easy for you, right? And every time you see a veteran, you have to say thank you for your service, right? But if a German fights for his country, he's evil, right? Yes, Bridge Jackson, Europe, the final battle. If you have 12 hours, guys, if you have the time, 12 hours to watch a very revealing documentary, you should watch Europe, the last battle. And I think you can find it on YouTube or anywhere. I think you can find it on Google, Europe, the last battle.net. That's where you can find it. Right? Another thing, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I already lost a few friendships over this. Is this new idea where people say, well, I'm a truth seeker, and I saw a video where they say that the ancient Egypt and Israel and all these things, the biblical story was not in the Middle East and Europe, it was in North America, right? And guys, let me show you where this comes from, because I think it comes from the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. They claim that the original indigenous Americans were black, and they are the real Europeans, they are the Vikings, they are everything. So now they say that because they can't prove they were in Europe, we have 2,000 years old statutes with white people, so they can't say that. So they try to say, well, the biblical story was not in Europe and Middle East, it was in America. Listen to this. I show you a short clip.
Hello, guys. Welcome to the show. It's your boy, A Truth Will Set You Free. Hashtag SFTS. Search for the symbols. I want to give a shout out to all my supporters, everybody who subscribed, everybody who hit that like button, everybody who leave me comments. I thank y'all. I appreciate y'all so much. And thank y'all for your support. There's no me without you, and I cannot express it enough.
100% proof, it says.
Hello, guys.
100% proof.
Welcome back to the show. It's your boy, A Truth Will Set You Free. There's no me without you, and I cannot express it enough. The name of this video is Ancient Israel is in America. Contrary to your popular belief in what you learned in schools, all the biblical stories that we learned growing up in church took place in the North American continent. There was no Israel in the Middle East before the World War, and he took the Jewish refugees and put them in Palestine where people already lived and named it Israel. That's why there's constant wars over there, because that's a land where people live.
That's why.
And that was not ancient Israel. Okay? So this is to prove that ancient Israel was actually in North America. I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. This is a map of the ancient world. We have Babylon, which is in Canada, Assyria, which is on the southeast, and it goes up into Ohio all the way to the left where Lebanon is. You have Canaan, you have Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. Okay?
Well, Patty says no one takes them seriously, but I spoke with a few white people who confronted me. Did you know that? Did you know that the original Israel was in America? And no, it's not, guys. And when you watch the whole video, you see it's all based on a stone they found with Hebrew inscriptions. And then he goes to Google Maps and he says, look, this mountain here, that's Mount Sinai, where Moses got the law. And then this is the Mount of Olives right here. And then here is the, when in California, to the peninsula of California, that was the Red Sea crossing, because it is on the coast, so Israel was there. And that's what I'm saying, guys. You have to be careful, right? It is not, okay, let's just see what the lies are and then just watch videos and then just, oh, that must be true, guys. You have to be grounded, right? If you believe because of few stones, and they say, yeah, the cedar trees of California, they only grow there, and not. If you go there, you have to deny all the archaeological findings we still do. You have to deny all those thousands of Greek temples, Sumerian temples, history, writings, right? You have to deny that Paul went into Asia Minor. You have to deny the church of Ephesus, Colossians, Rome. You have to deny all that. What about the Roman history all through Europe? You cannot just throw that away. Oh, that must have been in America because they found a stone. And then people get angry with me. The other day, someone said, "Yeah, but you deny truth. You don't want to open your mind to this, guys." And this is what I mean. Some Americans, they grow up in a piece of concrete with no real history, right? In a city that was founded 40 years ago, and then they accept that. But I've been to cities like when you walk through London, guys, or Paris, right? These cities are 2,000-3,000 years old, right? You feel, you can smell the history, right? And I think maybe Americans who live on the East Coast, right, or cities like Philadelphia, New York, right, you can still feel some history, right? And but guys, we have to have discernment because they want you to believe that Europe doesn't mean anything, right? We did not. We were never in the Middle East. We were never in North Africa. We were never in Egypt. We basically popped up 400 years ago. And then everything played out in America. Guys, you will destroy every little piece of rock you still have to stand on, right? I don't even understand how they can say that. Oh, that must be true. The mind gymnastics, yeah, and the total denial of thousands of years of history. It's mind-boggling to me, right? Guys, there are a lot of videos out there, and don't just believe anything you see, right? And some might sound convincing, right? But this is not how it works, right? Visionary vet, he obviously believes it because the pillars of Crowley Lake, they are melted. Yeah, but guys, because we find ancient ruins and molten things, that doesn't prove that the Bible story is in America, guys, right? And then what the black guy said in that video, that Israel was not formed until after the war. That's true. The modern day Israel was indeed formed after the Second World War was established in 1948. But it doesn't mean that there was no ancient Israel there. What kind of proofs are these, guys? Right? And the Bible tells us, right, most of the tribes are taken away by Assyria, right? They say, yeah, but the Mississippi River, that was actually the Nile River. Guys, if you believe this, guys, I think you never traveled. You never went anywhere. You just sit in a basement watching videos on a BitChute or something. But this is not how study works, guys. Right? Also, everything I say, right? You don't have to blindly believe everything I say in my videos. Today, I'm just randomly discussing things. I'm not going in too much depth. That's why I make my other videos. But also examine it. Look into it. Read books, guys. No, not Black Hebrew Israelite books, but real books from our history. Right? Do that, guys. No, the Bible story was not in North America, right? You have Assyria, Babylon, North India, the Medes, the Persians, Asia Minor, Rome, the Isles on the west. Oh, this all was in North America. Guys, this is not how it works, guys. Don't be too gullible, guys. It is good to have an open mind, right? But some people just take it too far. I'm sorry, visionary vet. You have been sucked into it, right? You have been sucked into this lie. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense, right? You have to deny so many facts and physical archaeology and history if you believe that. You cannot just do that, right? Emma says, Phil Break, it's an amazing documentary to watch. Oh yeah, they're still talking about Europe, the last battle. It is eye-opening, guys. Gave me chills too. Yes, Marx, everything could and should be questioned. Exactly. And we must have some understanding also, right? If you are just blank and you believe everything, that's also not good, right? Yeah, we have to do a lot of study and understanding stuff and look at the reality, and so we can have some discernment. Kuza says, honestly, man, it might be Noah got his wood from America. It's the only place you can find gopher wood. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's another argument. Guys, these are just small straws, and you create a whole history among a few arguments. Guys, the reason that we find certain things, like Egyptian artifacts, Hebrew, Phoenician things, right? Maybe even certain trees, because people brought that with them. North America is not discovered 400 years ago. America was a very well-known place to travel to, right? The Vikings were already in North America, right? And the Phoenicians were already in North America. We even find these old copper mines that date back like a few thousand years ago. Guys, there's nothing new under the sun. We didn't discover America. America was already discovered a long time ago. It was a very well-known place to travel to. And people bring things with them. Coins, language, they may have even built cities and stuff, right? Like that white man that came from the time where the Scythians still lived in North India, white people, probably from the tribe of Japhet, they went to New Zealand, right? They even ended up in North America. The Aztecs knew them. They would call them the white-bearded gods, right? You cannot say, oh, there is a tree here with Van Gogh wood. So, that's not how it works, guys. Have you ever been to Europe? Have you ever been to the Middle East? I have. They just faked that. Where are all those giant Roman cities in America? Where are they? I can show you in Europe where they are at mass scale. And even though I believe the Romans were also in North America, we find many ruins, old ruins, right? Kuza says, all I know were Caesar's Little Caesar and he has inverted everything. Yes, Kuza, that's what I'm talking about. But Satan did not make 2,000-3,000 years old ruins buried under the soil. These ruins are actually there. And when they excavate them, they find texts, wall paintings, artifacts, statues. Satan did not plant them there 20 feet under the soil in the 1800s. These have been there for thousands of years, telling us that the Bible story is true. And then you cannot just ignore all that and then say, well, we found gopherwood in Florida, so the whole Bible story must have been in North America. That's not how it works, guys. Gideon says, here in North America, they built over top of ruins of old cities. Oh, yeah, that's what they did, exactly. But that's what they did everywhere. That's what they have always been doing. When you look at these ancient temples in the Middle East, which were not built by Arabs or by Africans, that was our history. You see also an old temple built on an older foundation. And then they find underneath there is an even older foundation than that. That's what, and there is reasons that they used certain places to build temples, and that they built temples on top of that. But it happened in North America, even in Australia. We find old world buildings, right? When the Dutch went there in the 1600s, I think 1500s, 1600s, they found Australia. They call it New Holland. Later, the English renamed it Australia, but it originally New Holland. But I think it was not also not the first time they went there. Maybe they have forgotten that they were there. But also there are ancient ruins that don't match, right? But it doesn't mean that we white people just popped up a few hundred years ago, right? And the Negro race from sub-Saharan Africa built everything, right? And also this idea that the whole Bible story played out in North America, that's all that Afrocentrism, guys. They want to convince you that the indigenous Americans were black, right? The whole Bible story was black. The Vikings were black. The Greeks were black. The Romans were black. This is what they try to do, guys. They're really trying really hard. So no, the Bible story was not in America. Egypt, Israel, the land of Canaan, Babylon, Assyria, the Persia, Medes, Greeks, Rome was not in North America, guys. If you believe that, I don't even know how you do that. How you can just deny physical evidence, guys. We have actual physical evidence of Greece and Rome all described in the Bible. And it is true that Phoenicians, and as long as the white people have been here, we have been all over the world, right? That's why you find swastikas in South America and in China and in India and in North America, right? Some say that this whole Bible story played out in America came from the Book of Mormons. That's not true. I don't have the Book of Mormons, but I spent a few hours listening to an audio book, the Book of Mormons. And it doesn't say that the Bible story was in North America at all. However, it does say that the people in the time of Israel, Israelites, traveled to North America, right? And it is possible that the original Indians were a white race, because later you see that even Indians still carried swastikas, which was an ancient white symbol. And isn't it interesting if you go to the old Polish Scythians who lived in Poland, who fought the Turks? They were called as the winged soldiers. They drove around on horses with feathers. Feathers. Looks an awful lot like Indians later also driving on horses with feathers on their head and on their backs, right? So the white people have a lot of history, right? It's just very boring, the Book of Mormons. I came to a segment where they were talking about this tribe in the southeast of America fought this tribe, and this tribe fought this tribe, and this king moved here, and it is non-ending story of then this king went there, and he fought this tribe, and then this tribe went south, and then it is very boring, one thing after another, right? I don't know how historically correct it is, but there is some truth to the historical part of the Book of Mormons, right? And because they talk about people from the Middle East, which they called white people, moved to North America. And there is truth to that, guys. But they want you to believe that, like I said in my video I made yesterday, that the Arabs have always been living in the Middle East and North Africa, right? We never went anywhere as Europeans until the 1600s. It's all nonsense, guys, right? You have to ignore so much history. But this whole idea that the Middle Eastern European story actually was, the Bible story was North America, that all comes from a misunderstanding. Now, the Book of Mormons does not say that. And the Black Hebrew Israelites love that narrative because they want to completely destroy our history. And guys, if we don't wake up, if we don't start praying to God, right? I don't know how far God lets this go, but like I always say, God is making us suffer the consequences of our actions right now, right? And there is a remnant, right? But most white people, they still don't want to hear it. They still want to please the others only, even to their own destruction. Well, that you want that fate you're gonna receive, right? But now, by the way, you see in England that these liberal people who always stood for mass immigration and equality, right? That they're now being attacked, home invasions, stabbings, right? So, well, maybe this is God showing them, okay, you want this? You want these people in your home? This is what you're going to get. Maybe this is how our people going to learn, right? But it's only going to get worse. It's going to get worse and worse. Liam says, gaslighting strategies always have a piece of truth to keep us with causing doubt. Yeah. That's a good point, Emma. Emma says, people grow olive trees in Europe. I have 2 growing in my garden. Yeah, I got an olive tree too in my front yard. Someone gave my wife the tree. He said, your husband, he's a prophet. He said, I think he's a prophet. He needs a proper olive tree. So I got it now. Got some fruits too also. It started out very skinny, but it's nice, right? Guys, they find white, Caucasian mummies with blonde, straight hair, red hair. They find mummies with traces of cocaine. Cocaine does not grow in Egypt. That means they must have traveled to places like Colombia already, where these coca leaves grow, right? Maybe even brought some back. Potatoes came from South America to Europe, I think, right? Guys, this evidence is so feeble, so small. It's only a few little things. You cannot destroy an entire history because of that. No, guys, stop it. It is just too much. Come on. But these people who put it out, the black guy, it is not testimony of high intelligence as well, right? Let me go a little bit to the. Today I'm gonna react some more to the comments. Right, I want to keep it general today. Right, my other videos I go more in depth. Yeah, maybe this week I make a video about Egypt. I want to talk about North Africa, how that was not always the way it is now. It was not Arab, right? Also Ethiopia, right? This was all white dominated, guys, at one time. I'm gonna prove it in my videos. Now I'm gonna go to the comments. Also, this morning I had a different brand of coffee, which did not wake me up at all. I want my own brand next time. Visionary Vet says, time to live that feel and understand the light about everything. Love you, brother. I'm not sure what he means by that, but yes, guys, they have light about many things, right? But like I said, they did not make up ruins 20 feet under the soil. Right? This is not what they did in the 1800s. Let's dig up. Let's make deep carvings built in the 1800s. Let's make these old ruins, make it seem they are 2,000 years old, and then cover them with 20 feet of soil, and then look, we found. See, we. Oh God, guys, go to Greece, guys. These ancient 3,000 years old temples, right? It is there, right? Oh, and also the native Indians in North America did not build these old ruins we find all over the place. Indians never built anything with stone. These were much older. That also means when the Europeans came here, these ruins were already there. And it is not a mystery because Columbus was not the one who discovered America, right? It was a very well known trading route. White people have been all over the world for thousands of years. God created the white man and he said, replenish the earth. And that's exactly what they did, right? And then the Bible story is about Jesus reconciling Israel. And from Israel, the law would go out to the nations. They will be a light to the nations, to the people of Adam, the table of nations, right? All right, guys, I'm going to leave it here today. I hope you're going to watch my other videos. Other videos concerning Egypt, Ethiopia, North Africa, because if we really remember who we are and what our ancestors did and how noble we were, right? The Frisians speak about that they didn't want war. They want to travel, expand, but in righteousness and goodness, right? There was others who did not want to do that, right? Maybe they were of Cain, right? They taught the Inca Indians to the human sacrifices. That all happened, guys, but we have such a rich history, right? We are not just European people moving to America. We were much greater than that, and now we are only a small remnant left, and the ones who still believe in their Father is even a smaller remnant than that. But we, as a small remnant, our task is to be that light until our kinsmen, guys. We have been trying to convert the whole world, and now we are engulfed by the whole world. We tried to convert the other races, and many of us have become now like the other races. This universal gospel is a lie and it has now brought us to the brink of destruction. So we have to stand for the truth, right? Love you guys, and see you next time.